He stood in his dimly lit room, covered in blood, with body parts scattered across every corner of the house. He struggled to clean up the mess, gathering the remaining body parts into the usual trash bag. Just then, the phone rang. He picked up the receiver to hear the voice of his young son on the other end, checking in on him. At that moment, a severed head fell off a shelf and rolled towards him, making his eyes widen in terror. His son's voice came through the receiver, asking, "Dad, are you still feeling cold?" Yoo Young Chul was born on April 18, 1970, in Gocheon County, a rural area in South Korea. He came from a desperately poor family and suffered from hereditary epilepsy. In his childhood, his mother left the home due to his father's alcoholism and repeated abuse towards her and their children. This forced Yoo to live with his father and stepmother, who frequently beat him. Eventually, his mother managed to save enough money and took him and his older brother to live with her. Despite his mother's kindness, Yoo's behavior worsened. The warmth of his mother's care couldn't overcome his biggest complex, his poverty, especially since a wealthy family lived nearby, constantly reminding him of the social gap. This fueled his bitterness and envy. Just by passing near their gate, Yoo developed a personal hatred for the rich and resorted to theft, getting sent to reform school 14 times. In 1991, at the age of 21, he married a massage therapist named Hwang, and they had a son. Despite becoming a family man, he didn't change his bad habits and continued stealing and cheating, eventually raping a 15-year-old girl. His wife then filed for divorce. As he tried to cope with the divorce and his impending imprisonment due to the charges against him, he received news of his father's death from an epileptic seizure. His brother soon followed with the same illness, and then he was sentenced to prison, pushing him to the brink of collapse. Prison was the perfect place for Yoo to nurture his twisted fantasies of murder, turning them into plans he would execute when the time was right. Who better to target than the rich, whom he envied to the core? He found inspiration in reading about a notorious Korean serial killer who preyed on the wealthy, planning to follow in his footsteps when the opportunity arose. In September 2003, after being released from prison, he found a place to live in Gangnam, an area known for housing the wealthiest people in South Korea. Observing the lives of residents in the upscale neighborhoods nearby, his thoughts grew more disturbed. He bought a gun and started practicing for his future crimes by killing dogs. 13 days later, Yoo Young Chul sneaked into a two-story house owned by 72-year-old Lee Deok-soo, a professor at Sukmyung University, and his 68-year-old wife, Lee Yoon-ok. Before they could defend themselves, he killed them with a hammer. He felt victorious, coward's victory over those weaker than him. Having discovered that murder wasn't as difficult as he thought, and that destroying society was easier than trying to fix it, he struck again. This time, he targeted a family of 3 and killed them in the same manner, with a hammer. A week later, he killed a 69-year-old hostess, the wife of a Samsung Dong executive. On November 18th, Yoo struck again, this time killing a wealthy man in his 80s and his housekeeper, setting the house on fire. Reading your mind, dear reader, you might wonder how all these people left their windows open for the killer to sneak in. Let me tell you that most of them invited him in. As a former con artist, he claimed to have a successful business that could bring huge profits if only someone would fund it, promising the investor the lion's share of the profits. Who wouldn't invite such a promising entrepreneur into their home? Meanwhile, the police were puzzled. There was no apparent link between the victims, and the killer hadn't taken any valuable possessions. Even surveillance cameras showed little, leaving investigators with scant evidence about the killer's identity. Suddenly and without warning, Yoo Young Chul's crimes stopped. You might think this was a pang of conscience, but in reality, he had just fallen in love. This time, the woman was also a massage therapist, like his ex-wife, but the difference was that she worked at a center offering sexual services to clients. He abstained from killing, moved to another place, and started over. In his spare time, he wrote poems and drew, as if he had become a different person, unrelated to the greedy killer he once was. After 2 months, he proposed marriage and having children, but his girlfriend refused, citing his family's history of epilepsy and his criminal record. After this romantic proposal, she broke up with him for good. You can imagine what you felt at that moment and the next step he took after this painful rejection. Soon, the intense urge to kill returned, but this time he focused on workers in massage parlors offering sexual services. Yoo Young Chul started calling masseuses who provided home service, inviting them to his place. Once the women were inside, he would have sex with them, then hit them with a heavy hammer made to fit his grip. He would then mutilate their bodies, cutting them into 18 pieces and consuming parts of their bodies, believing it purified his soul. Afterward, he would dispose of their fingers far from where he dumped the bodies to hinder identification, then bury the rest of the remains on a mountain near Bongwon Temple. Unlike the deaths of the wealthy, the killings of these women caused little public uproar. No one cared, except for the massage parlor owners who felt something was wrong and called the police to report the disappearance of 2 women who worked for them. The number of victims reached 11. As they say, there's no such thing as a perfect crime. Yoo made a critical mistake when he used one of his his victims' phones to order a massage session from the same place he had requested 2 women before who had gone missing. The salon owner recognized the number and called the police again. Meanwhile, the owner convinced Yoo Young Chul to come to a hotel for a better massage session than he could get at home, and Yoo fell into the trap. The police sent only 1 officer to arrest the killer, who arrived late and left early, leaving the massage staff to handle the situation. When the killer arrived at the hotel to meet his victim, the massage parlor employees confronted him and managed to subdue him. The police officer claimed credit, saying, "It's true that the massage workers caught Mr. Yoo first, but didn't we send our man?" using "we" to refer to the lone officer who had arrived and left early. After the police took over, Yoo pretended to have an epileptic seizure and managed to escape for 12 hours before being recaptured. Upon his second arrest, Yoo confessed to all his crimes to the police and agreed to lead them to his victims' bodies while wearing a yellow raincoat, earning him the nickname Raincoat Killer from the media. He also admitted to killing random people who were neither rich nor worked in massage parlors, claiming to have killed 26 people. During his trial, he stated, "I had no intention of stopping," and added, "Women should be prostitutes, and the rich should know what they're doing." He showed no remorse for his actions against marginalized women or the elderly rich. In December 2004, Yoo Young Chul was convicted of 20 murders and sentenced to death. While awaiting execution in 2011, he attempted to strangle a prison guard, hysterically screaming, "Don't you know I'm mentally ill?" Yoo was recently moved for execution. After his capture, the Korean police underwent significant reforms to address inefficiency and corruption. One of his most notable statements during the trial was, "I did it to kill society when I realized bitterly that money is all that matters. I saw myself as an enforcer of punishment."